Just sad, just a bunch of people. We weeded out the weak people, right? If you're watching online and you're not here, you're weak. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. If you're watching online, hopefully you're doing well. I've been eating fairly clean this week, but not as clean as Christy Martinez would like for me to be eating this week. We work together on staff. Christy, she's in the back. And everything I put in my mouth to eat this week at the office, she says things like, is that roasted? Is that real salt? Is that real salt on it? What was that cooked in? I'm like, I don't know the answer to that. Yes, these are roasted cashews. Okay, I'm out of the game, all right? But whatever the case, I haven't been perfect. But I told Matt on the way in, I think I've lost several pounds this week. And more importantly, I feel really good sleeping a little better this week. My kids do have candy and chips in the house, so I have been looking at those thinking, that'd be nice. But it's good for me to have it in front of me and bypass it so I know I have victory over the enemy. So that's why Satan is in your life. No, I'm just kidding. There's no spiritual turn there. I was just trying to make one up. But this week is like we've got it started. We're rolling in it. I hope you're feeling good. I hope it's been good for you. And I know, Matt, you're going to take us to another level of thought about our food and maybe answer some of the questions that have been coming in the most. I am wearing this T-shirt, holding these gloves, and looking like this because Joel and why am I blanking on your name over here? Ryan have been helping me dig a hole out there. And we're digging a hole because we're going to put up an in-ground basketball hoop so that we can invite the kids from Slater Middle School after school to come play ball, give them some food, connect with them, and be for our city by helping the middle school kids have a place to hang after school that's safe and fun and enjoyable and help us build some relationships with them, as well as our neighbors across the street. A bunch of guys like to play ball, and I've built some relationship with them, and they're going to come over and play as well. So, yeah, we've been digging this hole. We're halfway there. We have to dig a 3-foot hole, and so if you want to help, let us know, and we'll watch you finish it. So, no. Matt, come on up. Thanks for being here. We're glad you're here. Let's get going. I'll leave this here for you in case you need it.
Thanks, Darren. Mic check, 1, 2. You hear me all right? Mic check, mic check. All right. Thank you. All right. So, well, I'm applauding you all for showing up. Sometimes it's usually next week is what I call like the low tide week, but it looks like it's maybe happening a little earlier. But I'm glad you're all here tonight. We are going to be talking about some more, a little bit nutritional things. I want to cover some questions that you've been having, but we're actually going to be diving into some non-dietary factors that affect blood sugar today. So you'll get a little bit of break from all the kind of the food up there. And if you haven't eaten already and you're kind of staring at the screen, it probably make you hungry because it looks pretty good to me. Yeah. But we're 7 days in now, and I've been asking a couple people around, and I get the question or the answer like, "Yeah, I'm doing all right," or "I feel okay." But I've actually had a couple people tell me that they've been losing weight, which is their goal. And yeah, I've got another one. So good. It's good to see you. Got some hands up. Awesome. I mean, 7 days in, that's awesome. That's if those are your goals that you've been really focusing on, it's really good to see that it's already starting. So. I went over a little bit last week on time, so I'm going to kind of keep this a little bit more brief and get to some of the questions and get to some things, and we'll dive right into it. We've already covered kind of what's on the menu and what's off the menu, so I'm not going to kind of kill that anymore. That's on the website, and it's also in those packets. So if you're still going, hey, is this food okay or whatever, you can always come up to me afterwards, and we can kind of discuss that for anything more specific. But going to the next slide, we're going to go into the questions. And one of the questions was, how often should I test my blood sugar during these 21 days? Well, during the 21 days, it's kind of optional for you. We're kind of using that before the 21 days to see where your baseline is, and then we're going to use it afterwards. So you can test as often or as little as you want during these 21 days. And it's kind of a cool experiment. If you're kind of thinking, hey, I'm kind of feeling off when I eat this certain meal or these types of foods. Maybe test around that and see if that is affecting you. But just make sure you kind of save about 4 to 6 strips towards the end to test after the 21 days. That's where we want to see some of that progress or post-challenge information. So you should have plenty of strips. I think most of you should have about 50. So just save yourself a few at the end. Another question I got on the next slide was, I'm concerned that my fasting or pre-meal reading is above 95, floating around that 100 or more number. And this could be due to something called the dawn phenomenon, as in dawn, the sunrise. Sometimes we can see our cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. We can see that cause our blood sugar to rise, and that could be due to a number of factors. It could be due to sleep quality, if sleep quality is degraded or poor, or if we're working swing shifts or night shifts and things like that. That can have a substantial effect on our overall metabolism and blood sugar levels. So things like late coffee or late alcohol intake the night before, the afternoon before, can also play into our sleep quality. So you might want to start, looking at if those are any of the factors that are affecting you in that sense. If you're seeing those first earlier morning or early day readings a little higher, again, you might be the type of person that fasting could benefit you a little bit, and spacing out those meals. You might want to kind of try to eat a little bit earlier, say about try to have that last bite 2 hours before your head hits the pillow. Give your body that time to digest that food. And then maybe focusing on reducing your carbohydrates, any of those like kind of starchy, whether it's potatoes or any of those things. Trying to omit those during your dinner time to see if that has an effect as you're waking up, and if that can tweak your blood sugar levels. And then again, exercise. So I was just talking to Jean and Diane, and they said they started walking after dinner. What a great habit, right? Because what you're doing is you're helping your body metabolize all that nutrients that are coming in. So typically, if we're not active, our body requires insulin in order to bring the glucose and the carbohydrates into our cells for energy. But when we exercise, the body doesn't need insulin, it can be a dangerous hormone at high levels, right? That's part of the diabetic disease process. So with exercise, your body can bypass that insulin, and it doesn't really require that. So even walking, some kind of exertion, can help you absorb that blood sugar or those carbohydrates in a really healthy way. So that's awesome. Just a simple little routine of walking after dinner can do that. So next slide, just to kind of give you a visual of what that might look like is, we want to keep that stable blood sugar within those kind of ranges we talked about last week. We don't want to be going over 120 milligrams per deciliter when we test 2 hours after that meal. So that's kind of in that healthy range. It helps us to burn and tap into our body fat stores. It can help us protect our lean muscle mass. If we're going over that, that's when the body starts to store fat. That's when we start to see insulin resistance and a bunch of disease processes when we do that over and over and over. So on the flip side of that, if you are noticing yourself in those higher ranges, either fasting or when you did measure at 2 hours, you can use things like skipping a meal, which is the fasting we talked about last time, and you can maybe work in that exercise, whatever that looks like to you, around the time of your meal. It can be beforehand, and it can also be after, too. That can help sensitize your body to intake those nutrients. So let's go to the next slide here. Somebody was asking as well, hey, what happens if my 2 hour reading, when I ate that food, 2 hours later I test, and it was around the same or even a little lower than when I tested before I ate it? Like, what's up with that? That's kind of confusing, right? We'd expect it to be higher. So that 2 hour span, we're just looking at before we eat and 2 hours later. There's a lot that can go on in between there, right? So what happens for some people is that spikes really, really high in around the 30-minute, 45-minute, or an hour range. That's when that peak is. And then they kind of start to come down after that. So if and this is why we're doing this, because we're all individuals, so we all respond differently to different foods. So for example, this was a study done in 2015, and they took hundreds and hundreds of different individuals, and each of those individuals tried different foods. It's kind of where the inspiration for this came along. They tested them with a banana and a cookie, and cookies. So the yellow line is the banana, and they noticed that, say, if you're that top person, that participant number 445, your blood spiked in about 30 minutes after eating a banana, and then it slowly started to come back down. Versus when they ate a cookie, who knows what kind of cookie, I don't know, doesn't really matter, but they respond totally different. So their blood sugar didn't really fluctuate. That person tended to respond okay to that food compared to banana, which is kind of weird because you're thinking like, banana, that should be a lot healthier for me, right? But bananas do carry a lot of sugar with them. Fructose is the type of sugar found in banana, and some people might not tolerate that as well as the other ingredients in cookies. You know, if it was an oatmeal cookie, maybe it had a little bit more fiber to kind of blunt that blood sugar response. We don't know the details, but you can see the individualization of this, because the person B down here in participant number 644, they really responded highly with that cookie. But you notice 2 hours later, they're kind of around that same mark, right? So if they were testing before they ate the cookie and at the 2 hour mark, it's looking really even keel. But what did they not do? We didn't capture all that information between. Now, these people are wearing some high-tech, like, you know, bionic continuous glucose monitors. We didn't have the resources for that. But here's your solution. You can retest that food. If you want to wait till after the 21 days, that's fine. Retest what you originally tested with and mark at 30 minutes or an hour. So you don't have to wait till the 2 hours. You can see, hey, what did my body do in those time frames? So kind of just get a little window, and that can maybe answer your questions. All right, we'll go to the next one. The other question I received was, what kind of sweeteners can I have during this metabolic reset? So I'm going to try to break this down. There's a lot of weird, funky names out there, right? You got things like Splenda and sucralose and aspartame and saccharin. These are what they call non-nutritive sweeteners because they don't technically add calories into the diet or into the food or drink that you're adding them into. However, there's been a lot of different research out there kind of weighing the benefits versus the costs. And for example, the International Journal of Molecular Sciences just recently, June 24th of this year, they said common artificial sweeteners can cause previously healthy gut bacteria, the good guys who are in us, to become diseased and invade the gut wall, potentially leading to serious health issues. So it may not affect your blood sugar necessarily or your insulin, but it's having other ramifications along with it. So they demonstrated that sweeteners can also make the bacteria pathogenic. That's not a good word. Anytime you hear that, you're like, that doesn't sound good. Pathogenic means leading to a disease. It found that these pathogenic bacteria can attach themselves to, invade, and kill our intestinal cell walls. So also not something you want to hear. So anyway, what I would recommend during this is avoid those things like sucralose, NutraSweet, Equal, aspartame, Sweet and Low. They go by different names, so just flip it over and you'll see that kind of chemical name in there. And this fits our template perfectly, right? Because we are about avoiding the processed, chemically altered foods in a lab, and we're focused on things that are coming more from nature, right? So this just makes sense to us. We're good with this. This isn't a shocker. So the safer alternatives are things like monk fruit extract. Monk fruit comes from some odd, I can't remember the Chinese name for it, but anyway, it's coming from nature. They just kind of extract that out of it. Same thing with stevia. Stevia comes from a leaf. So these are a bit safer alternatives. And then kind of in the gray zone, xylitol, erythritol, maltitol. These aren't as natural as, say, Splenda and monk fruit. The issue is they can disrupt the gut bacteria as well. So a lot of people who eat a little bit of this go, oh, that tastes good. I can have that. That's no problem. They end up adding it to everything. And you overdo it, and your gut will let you know, because you'll be running to the bathroom and finding a toilet in about 5 minutes. I'm going to try to save questions to the end, just so that I can kind of get through this material today, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Just feel free to come on up to me, just so I can stay on time. So sticking with monk fruit, stevia, you can even find some of this stuff at like Costco, and it's out there. But again, the main issue becomes when we start to use these things and that causes us to overeat. So if you can handle a little bit, in a spoonful in your coffee, totally fine. You add some monk fruit or stevia into that. Doesn't seem to be an issue. But if you're adding it to make, baked goods and then desserts and cakes, and then you're having 2 and 3 pieces, that's when it becomes an issue, right? So just kind of put the governor on that. All right, next couple slides, I kind of already talked about those. They have been linked to like Alzheimer's and cancer and things like that. So yeah, we're going to try to avoid the sucralose and all that. And we'll go to the next slide too. This is another question I got, one I get a lot when we do these resets, is what about protein powders? What about shakes and smoothies and all that stuff? If you've been through a weight loss journey and you've had experience with these shakes and smoothies that have helped you on that path, great. Keep doing what's working for you. The one thing I caution you is that, again, whole foods require us to chew. And the reason why we chew is that it signals to our brain to release the proper enzymes so that we can digest our food properly. When we just kind of chug a shake, it hits our system so quickly we don't necessarily have the same natural digestive response. It doesn't allow our body to prime its digestion. Not only that, but anything that comes in a liquid form is going to be hitting your bloodstream a lot quicker. It gets absorbed a lot faster than something that takes time to get broken down by your stomach acid and by your chewing, things like that. So if weight loss is your goal through this, then shakes are maybe something you want to kind of just take a break from. If weight gain is your goal on this, go for the shakes, because who do shakes really well? Bodybuilders, right? Bodybuilders have been using shakes since their inception of the sport, right? Because they know, if I want to get extra calories and not feel as full, I'm going to slam these shakes. I'm going to try to get as much protein and all that stuff in there. So they understand the concept of trying to increase their caloric intake through things like shakes and smoothies. Again, in order to get some kind of powder, some protein powder or something in its form, there's a lot of processing that happens, right? And our mode during these 21 days is to try and shift more towards the natural things. So I included this next slide to kind of give you a rough estimate. It might be a little bit difficult to read. Oh, great. I was trying to highlight it, and the highlighter covered it all up. But essentially what's under there, so you will never know. Yeah, that's a thick highlighter. Okay, I'm going to have to work on my highlighting skills. Anyway, what the protein powder is basically trying to say, let's see if I can read it here, is that there's 24 grams or whatever in a serving. But that also comes with a lot of different ingredients, things like we just talked about, artificial sweeteners and other carbohydrates. But you compare that with half a chicken breast, and you get a little bit more protein. You're getting about 27 grams of protein. You're not getting any of the other weird additives, and there's no sugar in chicken breast, so you know that it's a lot safer of an alternative. And again, it's gonna allow you to feel a little bit fuller, because you have to work at it a little bit. You have to chew your food, and your stomach has to kind of churn it, and then slowly pass it onto your digestive tract. Not so with the protein powder, right? It just goes right down there and then hitting your bloodstream. So anyway, those are some of the questions. I'll be here again to hang out and get some more of your questions after we go through the rest of the slides. So the next slide, we want to get into the non-dietary effects on our blood sugar, and those are going to be things like sleep and stress. Okay, so stress, it's kind of this weird thing that we talk about, but it's kind of an invisible force. What is it all about? Well, if we kind of break it down into more of a chemical term or something that our body produces, cortisol is a hormone. A hormone is just anything in your body. It's a little chemical signal that is a messenger to all the other cells of your body. And it can have it passes through our cell and has a direct effect on our DNA. It can literally either help us or hurt us by expressing genes in our body. So genes aren't the full story. It's about what are our hormones telling our genes to do, whether turning on or off. Cortisol is a very powerful hormone in that sense. And it comes from different things: toxins, thoughts, and traumas. If you want to think about the 3 T's of stress: toxins, thoughts, and traumas. And that can be a physical trauma, right? Car accident. A toxin, it could be, the artificial or processed foods that we're taking in, or if we're exposed to chemicals in our environment. And then thoughts, right? If 2 people get in a car accident, one person gets out and they say, thank God that no one was killed, we're safe. The other person gets out with their hair on fire and like, I can't believe this is happening. This is the last thing I needed today. Those 2 people, same event happened to them. It's just two different responses, right? So that response has an effect systemically on our body with our hormones and things like that. So this is cortisol. Cortisol's roles in our body is many, and I think we're still finding out what it also is involved in. But what we know is that it can increase blood sugar. So if we're going throughout our day and we're like, yeah, I'm fine, I'm really busy, I don't have time to eat, come say 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and you haven't really eaten, what's your body going to do? It's going to freak out. It's going, hey, we might need some fuel going on here. Like, we don't know when our next meal is coming from. Sound the alarm. So it releases cortisol, the stress hormone, and then that helps us to bump up our blood sugar. But if your blood sugar is already high and you're going through stress, it could potentially bump that up further. So we want some stress mitigating activities to look into. It can suppress your immune system. So if you've known anybody with some severe aches and pains, they go for a cortisone shot, right? Cortisone therapy, or they have to take prednisone. Those are all things that look like cortisol. They take it from our body and they go, how do we synthesize this? So that's why they can reduce the inflammation by suppressing your immune system. It doesn't fix the problem, but it does kind of help with that short-term pain, right? And there's a couple other things that it does. Increasing blood pressure decreases your sensitivity to pain, like we just talked about, that inflammatory response. Decreases serotonin. Serotonin is kind of one of these feel-good neurotransmitters in our brain, and it's very important. So decreasing that, I don't know, is all a good thing. So it does a lot, and not all of them are very positive. And you can imagine in today's society how much stress we are under over a long period of time. There's a book that talks about this called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And I think I mentioned it beforehand, but it's because zebras don't dwell for months and years about, that one time where I had to outrun that lion, like I was like almost his lunch, right? They get over it, and that cortisol response that their body went through is done and over with in a very short amount of time. So anyway, it's all about controlling cortisol, okay? So what is stress? Let's go to the next slide. Stress is the body's reaction to any change that requires adjustment or response, okay? The reaction can be physical, mental, or emotional. It's a normal part of life, and it can be perceived as good or bad. So life is full of changes, right? And again, it's how we're perceiving those changes that can either make or break us. Too much, too soon, all at once can cause huge stress for us, mentally, emotionally. But a little bit of stress, little by little, can actually cause positive effects too. Like look at exercise. Exercise is a stressor on our body. You start out by walking 1 block and you go, man, that was, I haven't done that in a couple of years. And then you do that again next week and you go, that wasn't so bad. And then you build capacity because you put your body through these little stepping stones of stress. So the next slide I kind of already talked about was the 3 categories: toxins, thoughts, and traumas. So if we can control these things and learn, especially with our thoughts, not to react, but to take that second and respond. So there's reaction to a situation, which is our immediate instinct, and then there's also the response. And that's something that for some of us can be a little bit tougher. I know it's taken me, years to be able to get myself out of these habits and to take that moment and take that second and choose to respond after a breath or two versus just to go to my reaction, my emotional reaction, right? And so that can literally, when you start thinking about it, reduces your cortisol. When you reduce cortisol, which has an effect on your DNA, over time, that can have a huge impact on our health. It's really cool when you start thinking about it that way. So let's talk about just kind of 6 tips to manage your stress. These are things like learn to say no. Some of us are doers, and we have no boundaries. And, I know I've been guilty of that in the past, and it's maybe a little bit of self-sacrifice to help other people. And sometimes and that's a totally normal thing for a lot of us, but if you notice it's starting to drain you over time, then you don't have the capability to help those people in your full capacity. That might be a signal, hey, let me start to at least take some rest. Even God rested on the 7th day, so I think we should all take a lesson from that from time to time. Avoid people who stress you out. Take a news fast. That's a huge one because these days it seems like the more news we watch, the more stress that can induce in a person. So it can almost be directly correlated to the more hours that we listen and watch news. That's could definitely have its effect on our health. Reducing your exposure to online stress, so social media. If we kind of find ourselves in a habit of reading comments and going, oh man, I gotta read all these. It's not human-to-human interaction anymore. It's not face-to-face interaction. It's little sound bites. It's little things that know how to get that reaction, that emotional reaction, and not that thoughtful response all the time. So just being aware of that can be helpful. Reframing the situation, making stress management a priority. So whether that's taking a walk or having some kind of meditation practice or prayer, all these things that we can do throughout our day, make a little changes that add up to huge changes over time. The next slide. One of the great ways to just deal with stress is exercise. Okay, it just might save your life, right? Somehow I don't think that picture is fully real. You never can believe anything you see anymore, right? It's always photoshopped, and they do a pretty good job. So exercise, again, it looks like a stressor to us if we think about it. Okay, well, it quickens my pulse. I'm breathing faster, and those are things in a stressful situation when we're in that fight or flight mode. But the good thing about exercise is that there should be a definitive endpoint to it. So once we stop there, our body recuperates and recovers from the exercise. So sometimes I tell this to my patients, it's like the benefits of exercise don't necessarily come from the exercise in the moment. They come from our ability to recover from that. And again, that's why we want to nourish ourselves with the proper food, because if we're putting garbage in, we're going to get garbage out. We're not going to be able to recover from our activity and our exercise. Sleep is the same way. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So it's the recovery. Your recovery game is really as important as your game in the gym or on the field, okay? All right. So next one is sleep we want to talk about. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Research Society, they recommend that adults aged 18 to 60 years old sleep at least 7 hours each night to promote optimal health and well-being. Sleeping less than 7 hours per day is associated with increased risk of obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, frequent mental distress, you name it. The list probably goes on further than that. So we are, that's one thing we haven't found a supplement for. It's like, okay, well, we think caffeine and coffee might be able to help if we don't get as much sleep, but eventually it's going to catch up, right? And this is a real challenge in today's society when we have night shifts and swing shifts that a lot of us are working, or newborns at home, right? Little kids. So making sleep a priority is something that's foundational to our health. We often focus on things like our nutrition and like exercise and supplements, but we always downplay sleep, like, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or what's the other one? Sleep is the cousin of death. All right, so it's like we hear these things like and thrown around, and it's like, well, actually, it's pretty kind of sort of necessary in order to have optimal well-being. So why does sleep matter? It leads to, again, obesity and insulin resistance. And it can increase your appetite, right? If you're staying up late, you might be more willing to go to the fridge and see what's in there. And then it's not like in the middle of the night you're going to eat like a healthy snack of like salmon and broccoli. You're like, what's in the freezer? Like, I want something, ice cream or cookies or something like that, right? So, and there's a whole hormonal cascade that goes behind that. So it's not just your lack of willpower. Proper sleep can help fight cravings, and that's shown because sleep deprivation can affect our cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone. Then our body seems like it's under stress again. And it can actually help you burn calories. Why? Well, we talked a little bit about last week is that every night, each one of us fasts. And whether you're sleeping for 6 or 8 hours or 9 hours, your body's not intaking any calories. It knows that. It says, okay, time to switch into fat burning mode. We're going to tap into our stores that we have right now because we don't know how long we're going to go till our next meal, till we wake up in the morning. So it turns on to that kind of tapping into our own metabolism. And this is why we see shortened sleep cycles affecting obesity and insulin resistance, because the body's trying to hold on to those calories. The CDC's Division of Population Health reports that as a nation we are not getting enough sleep. Going to bed at the same time each night is a very noble effort if you can do that. I know our schedules kind of change from day to day or week to week or month to month. But it could be as easy as just setting an alarm, just like you set an alarm to get up in the morning. You set an alarm, say, hey, in an hour, I'm going to start brushing my teeth and winding down and all that good stuff. So these are, again, some of the things that the CDC is putting out. Rising at the same time each morning helps your body find that circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is just like everything else in nature. We are tied into that natural world of every day, every night, we have to follow that. So if we try to stay up all day and night, you suffer the consequences of that. So being tied into nature, just like plants and other animals, we humans require that rhythm to stay healthy. So we'll go to the next slide. So a couple of things to kind of optimize our health. We want to sleep and wake up at the same time. Okay, that's what we just kind of talked about. So you can set your phone or an alarm to say, okay, time to wind down right now, instead of saying, one more episode. No, you don't even have to do that, right? Netflix just kind of counts down for you and just pushes you right to the next episode. So it's not fair. You're fighting a losing battle. Avoid eating too little or too much close to bedtime. This was one that I was really struggling with, and when I was doing my last reset, I said, I'm trying to hit all these kind of nutritional guidelines, but I'm still not feeling rested when I wake up in the morning. And the thing was, I was eating too close to when I was going to bed. So my body was trying to divert all these resources to trying to eat, or to try to digest what I'd just eaten, instead of getting my brain and everything down into that restful, deep sleep. So if you're not eating enough, though, you could be starting to wake up a little hungry in the middle of the night. And you want to just kind of find that sweet spot for you. Again, avoiding alcohol, caffeine, and other stimulants later in the hours of the day. So give yourself kind of a cutoff there if you are struggling with that. And you can say, hey, once noon hits, no more caffeine for me, no more afternoon run to get a Frappuccino and all that at Starbucks. Enable something called flux or night shift, or you can wear some awesome looking blue blocker glasses. They're like these orange, kind of gamer glasses. They're actually starting to make some like really cool looking ones, or ones that you can't even tell they're blue blocking, but the lens will filter out that highly stimulating blue light. So when I first started reading about this, I bought 2 pairs, one for myself and for my wife, so that she couldn't make fun of me by the way I looked with these cool orange glasses on. They look like the orange safety goggles you'd be wearing in a factory. But if you're on a phone or if you're watching TV or a computer, chances are they will be kind of emitting that blue stimulation light, tricking your brain, saying, hey, it's still daylight. So our eyes do more than just kind of see our environment. They're telling our brain back here, it's either daytime or we're going to secrete something called melatonin to start getting us into that nighttime routine. See, there's a couple other ones here. Aim for a cool room. If your room's really hot, it can affect the way that you're sleeping. So trying to reduce that body temperature. Your body will do this naturally, but sometimes it needs some help, especially as we get here in the summer. They do make, different cooling mats and things like that. If you have fans, air conditioning, all that stuff. Whatever you can do to kind of help drop your body temperature down a little bit. Let's see, exercising regularly, but not too close to bedtime. For some of you, if that's the only chance you get, and that's been working out for you, great. But sometimes it can get you into that fight or flight, more ramped up mode, too close to bed. But regular exercise can help you fatigue a little bit and get yourself a little bit into the rhythm of a bed routine. And then finally, avoid sleeping medications, which can cause sedation but not deep sleep. So these are things that for some people they might be reliant on things like Ambien and other sleep medications. But when they do brain studies, they notice that it's a sedative. It'll knock you out, so to speak, similar to alcohol, but it doesn't allow your brain to go through those recovery phases and really get that restorative sleep to your brain, where you're making new memories, you're creating your connections to your neurons are firing. So that's something to think about. I think I have some alternatives here to help you if that is something you're dealing with, just so that if you're looking to start to wean yourself off of those, there's some other options here that might help. And the next slide is kind of reiterating what I just talked about, why alcohol doesn't improve sleep. It keeps our brain in this higher frequency. There's something called glutamate or glutamic acid that gets secreted by our brain cells, and it's very excitatory. So it's like, ooh, okay, what's going on? That's maybe why sometimes when you've been drinking and your dreams may seem very different. They can be a lot more vivid in that sense. So the next slide is going to be some of those things I was going to talk about. So there's some different teas. Naturally, depending on how disrupted your sleep is, sometimes these things may not have enough effect for you, but you can always give them a try. You can kind of work from teas more into the supplements. The teas, things like chamomile, valerian, lavender, lemon balm, passion flower, all of these different things have been shown to have less of that sedative effect. Valerian root is a little bit more sedative, but you get the idea that you can start to sip on these things about an hour at night. I wouldn't recommend more than like 1 cup, because then you're going to have to get up and go to the bathroom, and that's going to defeat the whole purpose of trying to get some good sleep. Supplements, magnesium. So magnesium comes in many different forms. What they've shown is glycinate can help with that kind of relaxation effect. And citrate is another form of magnesium. So natural calm is something you can find in the stores. But I like magnesium glycinate is very highly absorbable. And it tends not to give you more of that laxative effect that sometimes the magnesium is known to do. Melatonin is something our body naturally creates, and if you have had some disrupted sleep, or say, for example, you're trying to plan for a vacation that might be in a different time zone. Some people have been using melatonin to help when they're leading up the first couple days to getting to their new time zone destination. They will take a little bit of melatonin, maybe it's at 1 milligram or so, to help them get on that routine of, say, being in the East Coast, or if you're lucky to go to Hawaii, somewhere else. But you can help to train your body a little bit to your destination time. CBD, some people have been reporting really, really good restful sleep with this without too much of the drowsiness, which is great because you want to get that good rest, but you don't want to wake up feeling groggy. And for some people, melatonin has that effect for them. So again, these are things that you kind of just have to experiment with yourself. Niacin is a B vitamin, B6, vitamin D3. So all of these things that can kind of help us out. And there's a couple of pictures here. These are like, you guys are like, what is going on here? So if you have a lot of LED lights or bright lights outside of your house, or your windows shining through, eye masks can just be a really great way to get that dark effect. So any little artificial lights, we live in a day and age where there's so much of that going on, and we don't think, this little LED is not going to affect me. But we should try to get our room as dark and as cool as possible. Around 65 degrees is a good target to hit. I was talking about cooling mats that they have, so there are some pictures there. The one in the middle is pretty interesting. This comes from kind of an acupuncture school of thought. That black mat, has a bunch of like cleats, those white spikes that are sticking up on it, and it can help you fall into a more relaxed state, because as you lay on it on your back, it's kind of painful. It doesn't feel good. I mean, as you can imagine, right? You're laying on a cleat of like plastic spikes, and you're going, "Why am I doing this? Why did I listen?" But what it does is it brings your nervous system, and it kind of tunes it down, and your nervous system kind of goes from that kind of higher state to a relaxed state, because your nervous system dulls that sensation, and it gets you into that more rest and recovery mode. It's been shown to kind of stimulate some of the parasympathetic or vagus nerve in our body, which is our rest and relaxed state. And then I want to leave you guys today. I only have a few more slides left, but I want to leave you guys with, because this is day 7 and you still got 14 days left, woohoo, with some good information that's come out about you doing the work here and how that affects us on a bigger level when it comes to things like COVID. Okay, so these are things that you may or may not have heard, but I don't think have been getting talked enough about. So this next one, these are all these scientific studies that I've been coming across. COVID-19 and diabetes mellitus, an unholy interaction of 2 pandemics. Now, when like the scientific community is using the words unholy, like that there's something to it, right? So COVID-19 has been shown by the CDC numbers to have the worst outcomes in people with metabolic syndromes. So those are things like diabetes. And they're noticing that even if somebody is very metabolically challenged, that even administering some of these things to help their metabolism, like insulin, can help their outcomes. And that's pretty interesting. So then we should start to pay attention and say, is there something there or not? So what else do we know that improves immune function and our metabolism? Well, it's exercise. So the next slide kind of talks about this, is that exercise and well-being during COVID-19, it's a time to boost your immunity. So it's saying that your body will release certain hormones and certain chemicals to help our immune system along the process. So we've been hearing all the time, it was, I know this is kind of old news now, now that we're moving past this, but it's masks and social distance, and that's it. That's all we can do against it. But we know that that's not the case, right? Things like exercise have a profound effect on our immunity. The other thing that the other title of this other paper was saying, sustaining efficient immune function with regular physical exercise in the COVID-19 era and beyond. They were giving recommendations in these papers on developing our physical health through exercise and how that actually improves tremendously the outcomes of COVID-19 patients. Going to the next slide. This is the last one I'll kind of share with you. There's plenty more. COVID-19, an acute on chronic metabolic syndrome, HbA1c marker of severe infection. What does that mean? So that means that we've had someone who's maybe been challenged with their metabolic health for decades, something they've struggled with. They may be pre-diabetic. We talked about the numbers in the very first week of how many Americans are dealing with these things. And then all of a sudden, here comes along an infectious disease like COVID, or another infectious disease, you name it. And that's the tipping point. That's where, the body says enough is enough, and it has a challenge with that. So I mentioned HbA1c last week when we talked about diabetic markers, but even in healthy individuals who are not diabetic, we can still use HbA1c as a marker for what our metabolism's been doing for the last 3 months. And when we look at that, we can say, has it been chronically high? Is there the beginnings of some kind of blood sugar dysregulation? Is our body having a challenge with carbohydrates? These are very simple markers we can look at And that's the reason why these studies are around, because those are things that when people come in to an ICU unit or an emergency room with some symptoms of COVID, they say, okay, well, let's run a basic panel. And they're seeing that the metabolic health of most of these people, it's diabetes, prediabetes, other metabolic concerns. So again, I want to give you the fuel here that the choices you're making on an everyday level to help give your body that reset, give your body that fighting chance. In the future, who knows what you might run into or what you might be exposed to, but if you have that foundational health, that can make all the difference. And so the last slide, just kind of leaving you with that, is that to have a public health impact, we need a personal health improvement. And I truly feel like, and that's what brings me here. I truly feel like that's the way that we progress and we improve our community's health and our country's health, is by starting with ourselves. And that's why I want to bring this to you. And again, I just want to applaud you all for sticking with the first 7 days. You got 14 days left of this. We're going to be back here next week for a little bit more information, and hopefully we'll have a good turnout then. So I'm going to hang out here. Any questions that you may have?